Welcome to Music Crush, a new music podcast hosted by the Flute New Music Consortium. I'm Nicole Reiner.
And I'm Elizabeth Robinson.
Hello, everybody. Today we're sharing a conversation we had with our friend, flutist and composer Nicole Chamberlain. We're starting in the middle of a chat between Nicole Reiner and Nicole Chamberlain. Hey, Nicole, did you want to fill us in?
Sure. I think my assumption is that at least some of our audience has probably been following Nicole for a while. She seems like a very popular lady, I think. And so some of the people listening might already recognize this post when I start describing it. But if you're not aware and you're listening, Nicole lost her father back in fall of 2022. I don't know, September or October. And so we were starting to catch up, right? And asking her how she was doing because, you know, she'd been dealing with this family tragedy and she's also still working, which is where this conversation leads soon afterwards. And so I had referenced this Instagram post that I remembered seeing. It was this really sweet photo of her dancing with her dad at her wedding. And there was a quote in it, something like, you know, that he had said something like, well, you'll just have to figure out how to make it work, right? And so I was asking her about that Instagram post. I was referencing it and I was asking her about that quote. And so we're jumping into the part of the conversation where she describes the origin of that quote. And then we kind of go on from there and talk about how she built her career.
Let's listen.
Yeah, I think that one post of yours, Nicole, like had me in tears. I mean, I think it was like a set of photos of you and your dad.
Yeah.
And you said something about him just like he had always told you just like find a way to make it work or something. And I was just like, and I'm not a crier, but I read that on Instagram while I was eating breakfast and I would just start bawling.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Very touching.
Because that is he said that at a moment, and I'm going to get emotional, but a moment in my life where I was going to quit.
Oh, wow.
Like, I mean, and I say quit, I was in the throes of being a dramatic teenager. Let's be clear. I mean, I had gotten rejected from every audition that year, and it was creeping up on my senior year, and I was going to have to start auditioning for colleges. And I think now I think about it, it was the last chance I had to make All-State. So that was my senior year, because I remember getting that notification and I remember just like epic meltdown. And I had told him, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've hinged everything on doing this. And it's not clearly this is not for me. And you know, and he just said, well, and he said, he was giving me other options. Well, you're in AP biology. And I was like, man, Dad, I only made like one semester of an okay grade. The rest of it is just a train wreck. And, you know, he was trying to like help me find some different avenues to think about if I was really ditching music. And then it came clear to him that that's the one thing I really, really wanted to do. And he's like, well, I mean, if this is what you want to do, I guess you're just going to have to figure out how to make it work. Basically realizing that I needed to make sure that I needed to understand the traditional avenue wasn't going to work for me. And I just had to find a workaround. But then it kind of came full circle when he was in hospice, because we got to spend about 2 weeks with Dad in hospice. He wasn't expected to make 3 days, and he rallied for like 2 weeks. And we had like a solid week.
Wow.
A solid week of him being alert and with it. Which he hadn't really been for a couple months. But he was starting to fade out at the end there, like you do when you're dying. And one of the nurses, I mean, it's Savannah, where I'm from, Savannah, and that's where he was in hospice. There's a big military base. So most people's family had family members in the Army, like my dad. Dad was an Army pilot. Flew Chinooks, flew helicopters. So one of the hospice nurses came in, we were kind of talking, and she's like, man, he's really hanging on. I can't believe he's been with us this long. It's really amazing. I'm so glad he's kind of rallied for you guys these last few days. And she's like, you know, and it made sense when I found out he was a helicopter pilot, because my dad was a pilot. And that's the thing when you're in Army or when you're in the military and you have to get the aircraft out. You just have to find a way to make it work. That's kind of the phrase that kind of stuck with me. Yeah. But it was hard. I mean, I'm like physically sitting, and I mean, I have deadlines. I have a deadline next week. I'm pretty close to making it, and it's Christmas music.
Merry Christmas.
And I'm sitting, I mean, I know it's going to be a long haul about this because Dad's not going to go quietly into the night. And so, you know, I brought on my stuff to work, and I'm sitting in the hospice room trying to work because I'm an idiot. You know, I'm an idiot. And, you know, things I could have waited. It could have waited. I didn't write. I actually set a pretty good bed of music down, you know, hanging out with Dad in the hospice room. But I mean, it's like, I wouldn't recommend that, because then, and the part of me when I was like, you know, if I start this and I don't finish this in this room, like if I don't finish this before Dad dies, I'm going to have to work on this after he dies.
Oh yeah.
You know, and we have to revisit everything. And I was really mad about it because I couldn't do it anymore after that, because Dad progressed rapidly after that day. I started working and was happy with most of the material that I'd written. So yeah, I had to work on it after he passed and revisit it. And there's a part of me that didn't really like it anymore, because you go through those phases when you're writing and you hate everything. And but there was a part of me who's like, I want to make it work, because that's, you know, kind of like where I was when Dad was dying. So I made it work. I mean, I've got a lot of work to do on it as far as like slapping on an ending and editing it, but like I got through it, but complicated by having surgery. So yeah, so anyway, yeah, that was hard to go through, but I'm glad. Is this a good time to segue into what happened after that?
If you want to.
So during this whole time, and it had been months of Dad's health failing, basically things started going bad south after the flute convention. I got off the plane, got home, and that day, Galen, my oldest sister, called me and said, you need to, Dad wasn't doing well, and Mom was having a hard time. So I decided, okay, because I went down to Savannah like 3 separate times. So that's why, in like 2 months. So that's why I'm really, really confused. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I went down. Somebody called me and said, Galen, I think, called me. Mom called me and said I didn't come down. And I could hear Dad like moaning in the background. It was really awful. So I drove down, and we thought we were going to lose him that time. He got put in the ICU. So I was there like for a week and a half. And then I came back to get my ultrasound to find out what was going on with me. And then I went back again because I felt I didn't like Dad had gotten a little better, but he wasn't good enough. I wanted to just visit again because I felt like things were going south. So I visited again for a long weekend. Then I came back for an MRI. And then Dad started getting worse again. And so I was talking to Mom on the phone, and I was like, Dad's not gonna get better. I hadn't told her anything. And I was gonna have to have the surgery, and there's gonna be a point where I was gonna be able to come down. And she could tell I was not feeling good. It was getting pretty bad. And then people that saw me in NFA probably said, ooh, she packed on some weight, because it looked like I was 6 months pregnant. But it was all, it was all in the belly, or they thought I was pregnant. I don't know. But anyway, so but I had to tell her that I was gonna have surgery, and they thought it was ovarian cancer. So that was a fun phone call when Mom already had her. It was already a bad day. We were already talking about how bad Dad was doing, and she was really upset. Even my sister that lived there was staying the night with her because Mom was so upset. And then I had to tell her, like, guess what? Let me pile on. So that was a fun conversation. And then I had to come down, and then because they were putting Dad to hospice, and so I came down, and Mom, and then he died about a week before my surgery, and Mom was like, you need to be at his funeral, but you also you cannot delay your surgery. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but we could do the like memorial part later, and I can be there for that. And she's like, nope. And she wanted the full military honors. So anyway, we had to wrangle that, but thanks to Allie Park, she helped me find the right people to get the military honors done quickly, because it wasn't Allie Park's a flutist in the Army band in Fort Stewart, which is near Savannah.
Nice.
So she was able to help me wrangle the right people, and we got that done. So mom was happy. I had my surgery, but it's taking me like 8 weeks to recover because the incision's like vertical, and so I can't play flute until the end of December. But anyway, so that's where that is going with all of that. So the shocking. So I guess I should have opened with "I'm fine." Sorry, I'm fine. The ovarian cancer type I have is like endometrioid ovarian cancer, which is the lazy kind that has no ambition, much like myself. So thankfully it doesn't respond to chemo, and so but it does respond to hormone blockers, and I had like stage 1, grade 1, like it was in its infancy. The bulk of the stuff they had to take out was due to the stage 4 endometriosis, and the grapefruit-sized uterine fibroids that I had, that Elizabeth and I have affectionately called the Gorns, were all removed. So I shouldn't have any more mishaps like in Memphis, where I had an ovarian cyst explode on me. I won't have to deal with that anymore. So it's all good news. Looking forward to not dealing with that garbage anymore. And like, I don't look 6 months pregnant anymore. So all my pants fit better. Well, I hear they will fit better. They seem like they'll fit better. I've not really worn a lot of pants. I've worn some leggings, but yeah. Yeah, so musically I'm on a break as far as flute playing is, but I will be back by the end of the month, and, you know, getting back on the long tones and starting from, you know, I've had to do it before, so it's not that big of a deal. You know, you play flute long enough, it comes back quicker. You just have to be patient with it. But anyway, that's what has physically been going on with me, because I know I've been quiet about it because I didn't know if I was going to have chemo and how long I was going to be out, and I didn't want people to think that I was going to be gone forever and then not hire me.
Right.
The problem with freelancers is getting sick.
Yeah.
Right. Is or pregnant, you know.
Or
we
having
all
any
know
life
we all have friends that like have gotten pregnant and hide it as long as they can, so they can continue to work. And it's a similar situation where I was trying to hide, because if I had chemo, people were probably never going to hire me. I mean, I thought, not anybody's ever said that to me, just thought they would think, oh, well, we won't hire her this year, and then forget about me. And so I was trying to keep that under wraps. But now that I know I'm going to be fine, and this is it, the surgery where they took all of my organs out, I'm just going to heal from that and move forward. So, and just have hot flashes because I have no hormones. Anyway, it's good times. It's a long preamble. I'm sorry.
No. Well, I wonder if we went back, how many times we could count your apologies. Just also something, I don't know, is it female, is it just a personality type? But yeah, no apologies, right? But
yeah,
but we feel apologetic, and we feel like it's our fault somehow when something goes wrong. That is totally
no, I mean, more apologizing for being nonsensical about my storytelling here.
I mean, it's not like it was a linear experience for you in the moment, and it's still, we're pretty fresh off of both events. So if you were delivering it in a precise monologue, I might be worried about you.
I feel like I've caught up enough people that I should be better at it.
Yeah. What is better?
Yeah. Oh well. I do better in text. Like, I was catching up a friend who I usually do nutcrackers with every year, and she's like, "Finally, we're gonna do nutcracker this year." I'm like, "Oh,
nope.
Let me tell you what's been going on." And she's like, because she lives in another city, so she actually commutes to do the nutcracker. So she had no idea, because I don't get to see her very often. But yeah, she was, oh God, oh God, everything just kept escalating with each bad news. It's like, I feel like I'm making this up, but no, this is really what has happened the past 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there were a couple of topics in there that I think are interesting.
Okay.
And either of the Nicoles can jump in and decide which direction we want to go. But this is not the first time that I've been around that you have had a major life incident and still felt pressure to produce and to work around it.
Yeah.
Is that something worth exploring?
Yeah, and to be honest, this last epic event, I saw it in my mom, who's downstairs actually. Probably doesn't appreciate me talking about her. But we're gonna do it anyway. Power
Hi,
through.
Mom.
During this whole time with Dad being in, she was. If you hear some snoring, it's Gertie under the table. My dog. Anyway, seeing Mom how she managed trauma is like, oh, that's where that is. She's trying to sell that the other house that they had that we had grown up in. It was out to renters, and her and Dad had tried to sell it before he went in the hospital, like the little gap where he wasn't in the hospital, and it had sold, but Dad was incapacitated, and she wanted to sell the house because that's what he wanted. And so she was like, I was shuttling her between the lawyer's office and the hospital, and so that she could have the right legal power to sell the house without Dad's signature. Because it was like, it already sold, but we were trying to like do the final closing.
Right.
And to see her worry about that and still try to get that done. I was like, the sellers will understand. Your husband of almost 60 years is dying. You've been together since you were 10. Like, yeah, that's another sad story. Yeah, their parents were friends. That's how they met. Anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I think I do the same thing. It's the one thing I can control is my work, and what I do. And, but there's also like, I still have to pay bills. I mean, the downfall of being a freelancer is that you don't get paid time off, unless you save a lot, which we have enough in savings. But, when Dad got sick, I'm not teaching flute lessons. There's no way. I haven't taught flute lessons in almost 2 months now. And, there's no way I'm gonna, but I can write. And I can edit and I could do other things. But when Brian had his my husband had his brain aneurysm, like I had signed, that's when I was judging for FNMC.
Yeah.
That was the only thing keeping me sane that time was like, I couldn't function creatively, but I could do that. And Brian, when he was awake, would listen with me because he's also a composer. So we would listen together. And at one point, he's like, I can't, because there's only so much stimulation he could do. So I ended up having to do a bulk of it by myself, but just listening to it. But he heard me complain about it a lot as I was trying. I mean, just my own like how to critique things. Yeah, and then in Memphis. But in Memphis, I felt actually I guess in Memphis, that was the Mid-South Flute Convention. And that's when I had the ovarian cyst burst. And that's when they found out I had endometriosis the first time. And so they did a laparoscopic surgery. But I also had a mystery infection from that burst that the surgeon couldn't figure out why I had that infection. But I had a booth. And I was trying to like run it, and I'm sitting there. I thought I just had the stomach flu, and Elizabeth was worried that we had eaten at the same place, so that maybe we both had food poisoning. And I think Elizabeth was also bracing for food poisoning, right? You don't remember that? Because we had that really, really shady dinner the night before.
I remember we had the shady dinner. I think I remember you saying you thought it was the Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And I was like, absolutely no way that you were this sick from coffee. I don't remember being worried about my own food poisoning. I think I remember trying to convince you it had to have been something
Maybe
more
that's what it was.
substantial than coffee.
You were
from a
worried about
box.
her food poisoning, I bet.
I was very worried about Nicole.
Yeah, she was. Elizabeth was going to not drive back to Missouri, and I was like,
Elizabeth
"I'm
was gonna run
fine."
your booth, but you wouldn't let me. I was
No,
like,
I
"Let me
know.
do this for you," and you were like, "No, it's fine. Just go home." And then I get in the car maybe 2 hours later, and I get a text that she's on her way to the hospital, and I'm like, "Well, great. Now I am too far away to be helpful." But
Which is part of the plan. I mean, I was, and I'm sitting there propped up. I mean, I'd gone back to the hotel to rest, and then came back to the booth to sit and try to sell some things. And I was sweating, and thought maybe I had the flu, and I don't think I sold much that day, for obvious reasons, because I wasn't so interactive, and I looked like death, and people were probably afraid they were going to catch the flu from me. Yeah, but then I had to break down the booth, because I made it all the way to closing. I was like, I did it. I made it all the way to closing. I'm going to tear down my booth. And Mary was there. Mary Matthews is there. And I was putting things away. And I usually just do things by myself, because there's a certain order that I need things to be in. And I didn't want to forget anything. And if I just do it all myself, then I know where everything is. And I remember I looked at Mary, I was like, I'm going to need you to help me. And Mary's face is like, I'm sorry? Like, you must feel like really bad. Are you okay? And I was like, I don't know. But she still went to dinner. I was like, I'm just going to sleep it off. I'm just going to go back. And so she went to dinner, and she's like, okay, well, if you feel that way. And then ended up at the hospital. So I took myself to the hospital after Brian yelled at me and hung up on me because I wouldn't go to the hospital. Which is oddly enough how I went to my doctor to find out about ovarian cancer, because Brian got mad at me and told me he wasn't going to come on a trip to New York City unless I went to the doctor, because he was worried that something was really wrong. So here we are.
oh, that's 2 points for Brian.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to encourage that behavior, but the parent that's what's happening. He doesn't throw a hissy fit ever, and those are the only 2 times he's like really gotten mad at me. So paid off, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of freelancers are worried about being able to pay the bills, and hospital's really scary if you don't have insurance. And so it's like the perfect storm of like, well, do you not work and go spend a reckless amount of money, or do you try to power through and hope it goes away?
Well, you
God, I
mentioned
hate that that's reckless to take care of yourself when it turns out to be something huge. So did you not have insurance when you?
Oh, I did, but I mean,
Good.
thanks to Brian, because Brian has a corporate job. But if he hadn't, I would imagine this would have been. I don't think I would have. No, this would have been worked out wildly different. Yeah, just mainly because I'm hard-headed and think I can power through. But the other reason, because I'm also cheap, and going to the hospital is very expensive. Even when you have insurance.
Yeah, freelancing brings out the cheap in you.
It does. It does. Yeah. Yeah, and then you have parents, like most people's parents, their parents were like my grandparents were children of the Depression, and a lot of that carried over to my parents, which, carried over to mine, especially when my dad retired from the Army and we still needed income. That retirement wasn't going to pay for 3 girls to go to college. So him not having a job and knowing that we had to all tighten our belts, was a lesson learned. And then you go to college, and then you have to tighten that belt a little more. I think we're all a little traumatized by that. If you didn't have like a full scholarship with like all the bells and whistles.
You talked a little bit about worrying about reputation or relevance, or just staying on people's minds as a freelancer, and that's something else that I think is interesting.
Right. I mean, yes, I think people forget about you very quickly. I mean, and I think that's my total success from the beginning has been my mode of operation is if I am annoying enough where people are like, ah, Nicole World, well, she must be free. You know, she could probably do this thing. You know, because I've done it. I've had friends where I suggest friends for gigs that I can't do, and then you know, and I'll forget, oh my God, why haven't I recommended this person in so long? Like, it's just no reason other than I just saw the other person the other day, or I just saw a post the other day, or I just saw something and that's who immediately came to mind. But somebody else has had other life things going on and we haven't connected in a while. And so I forgot to recommend them for this gig they're more than capable of nailing, you know? And so I've seen it in me do it, you know, forget to recommend people. There's an email list I have of local people that I always recommend, and I just kind of usually forward it. But sometimes I'll try to I'll change it up because geographically somebody else is closer. And It makes more sense for them to do it. And so I'll put them on the top of the list. But yeah, I feel that way. People forget, oh, Nicole wrote that thing for flute and bassoon and clarinet. We should play that. You know, but if I don't tell people about it relentlessly, they'll forget it. And so I think that's, if I get sick and take a month off, you know, people are like, where, that lady, where'd she go?
Yeah, but it is, I think, just human nature. You know, your short term or medium term or whatever memory isn't going to be able to call up somebody you haven't seen in a year.
Yeah, right. Or, you know, you lose track of who's moved where to, you know,
Right.
you find out our friends moved back to town and you want to drop them some work, you know, and then you forget about your good old buddy that's been sitting here the whole time, you know, got to give her some work. But I haven't had a lot of work, so it's not been a problem. I mean, like musically, like I haven't been performing as much the past couple years in that regard, at least locally.
Do you find when things are going well or just average that you're actively focused on staying on people's radar?
Yeah, when things are trash, that's when I totally fall off the wagon. So, which is why I just don't feel like posting anything, you know, or letting people know or thinking about future work, because this thing is, I need to get through this obstacle and needs all my attention. But when I'm feeling good and things are doing well, people want to hear more about those. Like, she's doing well, so it's the whole idea. Like, if people see you working, boy, it's kind of like in high school when you don't think of somebody in that way, and then somebody starts dating them, and then all of a sudden you're like, that person's attractive. You know, it's kind of that idea. If people see you working, then they want to hire you. But if nobody else wants you, why do they want you?
Yeah, that's frustrating, but I see that. Yeah, it's almost like a lack of confidence in your own decision-making skills. You know, a personnel manager will go with whoever else they're already seeing getting all the work. And so then those are the people who end up stopping up all the work in the area.
Right, like you trend. You know, there's trends. I mean, there's definitely trends. I see it sometimes in like my music sales, like you know, I'll have a piece that like really sells, and then it just won't for a while, for a very long time, and then it might come back. Except railroaded. People I mean, how many flute choirs are there in this country? I mean, I thought I would really think enough people are like, all right, we've played railroaded, you know, or there's just so many ensembles, but apparently not. Like, apparently there's new ensembles all the time, and they're always surprised that railroaded exists. So, I mean, you know, I'm glad, but it's just so crazy at me. I thought at some point that piece would just hit a wall.
Well, and French Quarter was that way for a while. I guess maybe it hit a wall at some point. Now it's railroaded.
It may have, and maybe quartets are not as popular as flute choirs. I don't know, but yeah, French Quarter. It really, I mean, Flute and Music Consortium really knocked that one out of the park and really got it some traction, and that really got out. And then, you know, it's slowed down. It still sells every once in a while, but not like it did when after Flute and Music Consortium, you know, I got to be a finalist. So yeah, that was very helpful. What, Elizabeth?
I guess I'm still stuck on this active promotion of yourself. Do you feel like you have to focus on trending or focus on making specific things trend? and I guess by trending, I mean, you're talking about promoting yourself and how it falls off when things aren't going well, which I think is human and normal.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm more interested in how much brain space it sounds like it might be taking up when things are going well.
It takes I'm ashamed to say it takes up a good portion of it.
Why are you ashamed though? I think this is
I mean, it's vital to
something
my it's vital to my survival, is, you know, to make
it's vital
money.
to everybody's survival, and
Yeah.
it's something I don't feel like I know a lot about, and it sounds like it's so second nature to you that you are hesitant to give voice to it. So
Well,
more
my mom
interested
says I inherited. My grandfather was a used car salesman. I don't know. Yeah, he's and like not with a company, his own lot.
Wow.
I love
Like,
how moms can take a special skill and make it sound like something that isn't
Something.
directly contributing to your professional success. But please continue.
but I mean, you know, it's you know, and then you know, from some people, they don't know that like my other degree was in digital media, which included like a graphic design aspect. So I spent a career for 10 years out of college being a graphic designer, web designer, and being involved in the sales team. So that was just a training that if you have a product, you have to sell the majority of the time than actually produce. And so that does take up a lot of my brain space because I think more because of that background. And it's kind of fun. I like making graphics. I mean, for myself, not for anybody else. Don't get any ideas, anybody. Don't like, that's why I left. I don't like people telling me how to color. But anyway, but you have to, and I think that's where a lot of composers and just performers fall short, is that it feels really slimy. And don't get me wrong, at a certain point you get over it as much, but in the beginning, man, you feel like it feels gross. It feels super gross.
Well, I mean, as somebody who spends a lot of time interacting with you, I feel like I'm more aware of your social media presence, and I have never felt like it was obnoxious or pushy, although you are very apologetic when you talk about it, as you are, as Nicole Reiner has observed, you just are in general. But like, do you have a strategy? Do you have a philosophy? If we were digging for advice to give to other performers or composers who maybe aren't as comfortable with it as you project being, what kinds of advice would you offer?
I think some emotional detachment from what you have to sell. You have to put it at a standpoint. If I was in charge of selling this person, what would I do? And you have to, I think there has to be some separation of that. If you feel gross about it. And that's what I've had to compartmentalize. Well, as start seeing things as products and not as like, look what like being proud of it. Like, girl, you got to sell some things. So what are you going to sell? What do you think appeals to the broader audience? What do you find there's a niche for? Like, okay, these Christmas duets were fun to arrange, and I did them so that I could play them with my students. But there's a lot of people, my advanced students, like not just like the young ones, like there's a need for it, because I had to make one. So if I need it, I'm not the only person with this original thought, but I had a skill set that I was able to do it. So like maybe someone else can benefit from it. And so those Christmas duets have probably my best sellers than anything I do, which is telling. But yeah, I think just separating yourself, and just putting that aside, like you're going to feel gross. So just embrace it, put that to one side, and find out what, so everybody has a skill that's in need. It's just, you just got to find that niche of people that are looking for that. And so I found it in Flutist.
I think that's great advice, even if you don't feel gross.
Yeah.
Your quote's gross, because I think it can be hard to have perspective about yourself.
Yeah.
As you're trying to promote yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Something I have always appreciated when I go to your website, Nicole, is the great mix of things that you have. I mean, you've got some really great original compositions that I'm excited to program on my recitals. You've got some stuff that is maybe very challenging for some of my more advanced students, but attainable, things like crosswalk and smorgasbord I love to do with students who are just starting to dip their toes into extended techniques. And then you just have some really practical arrangements too, like Christmas duets and other things that you've done over the years. And I see some composers who feel like, I don't know, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but like they're too good for that, or like, oh, this is going to be problematic to their overall brand. Maybe I'm not really sure what they're thinking, but I'll talk to composers about practicality sometimes when they ask me for my advice in a much more specific way about how to, just instrumentation and getting performances and stuff. And you're going all the way, to the other end of the spectrum of just like service music, gig music on top of serious art music.
It's just not, it's not glamorous.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The glamorous thing is to be, is to have orchestras perform your music, or operas,
Opera,
these big grandiose things.
opera.
Oh my goodness. So much. And that's great. And it's amazing. But there's a real need for the other stuff. And that could be very rewarding. At the very least, how I've approached the arrangements, not only do I need them as a flute teacher, or like I need them for a gig, which is a bulk of it. Like no one's asking me to write these things. I'm like, oh my God, they want me to do this with XYZ. And I'm just like, I'm just going to do it. It's also a very good compositional exercise because I can take out, the creativity part and worry more about, I mean, there's some creativity, but not like from like making something up totally from the ground up, but it's nice that I can start thinking about form and function and harmonies. It's a good exercise for development, and it would just help your composition. And why not make money off of that exercise? I mean, it's like practicing, but making money to practice in a way. Yeah. Well, and it's a nice break from like writing something really crazy and then like, you know what? I just want to write a old-fashioned Christmas solo. Make you feel good.
Well, and then you can see in those sales that other people wanted you to do that too. I mean, as you are bringing it back to how practical it is, obviously other people needed it too. So
yeah, I think practicality is poo-pooed a lot, like you said, but there's something to be gained for it. But I'm not in a position to be unpractical. I don't know many people who are, but I guess some people, it just feels too commercial, like a sellout. I don't know.
Maybe if you have a full-time academic job, you can not write as much, although there's pressure to write a certain amount.
Right. And I think there's also, it's really different for an academic. I mean, I think there's more pressure there to write very seriously and you want to make sure you don't look unprofessional.
Whatever that is.
Whatever that is. You know what I mean? Like writing serious music, contributing to the arts. And maybe Christmas music doesn't do that.
It's funny, it feels like such snobbery so often, in academia. But I mean, if you go back to the roots of musicians, we're just supposed to be entertainers. Those good old history survey classes that you take as an undergrad when they talk about, the first gigging musicians they were basically just trained monkeys that showed up and entertained royalty or whatever, right? And there's still, every time I get called to sub in a local orchestra around here, I absolutely feel that. And it's okay. Like if we're not playing things that are entertaining, if we're not, for those of you who can compose, writing or arranging things that are entertaining, then what's the point? You write some really esoteric opera that's got 5 different tonal systems in it and is this really fascinating thought piece, but nobody's going to perform it. No one's going to be able to make sense of it,
I mean, some people, they're just trained and wired to write complicated, interesting music. And some of us don't take ourselves too seriously whatsoever. And this whole thing's a big joke. And I'm just
what are you talking about?
I don't know. If I'm going to write music, I have a better time if I'm writing more fun stuff. I mean, I did it in college. I wrote some more serious things, which is hilarious because I had 0 life experience. I probably should have been writing more lighthearted things then and be writing more serious things now. But the more serious things get, the more lighthearted the music becomes.
Oh,
So
we try so hard to be serious in our
Oh my
teens and
God.
20s,
Oh
don't
my
we?
I think there's only one piece from my college years that I even have available for publishing because the rest of it is just like, okay.
Which one is it?
It's a song cycle. It's
Oh,
actually it's prayer cycle. So each movement is a saint prayer for each woman in my family. So like my
fun.
mom and my three sisters
That's
and
really
the Hail Mary.
beautiful.
Yeah, and it's not like what I write today. Like, but it is. I mean, I'm proud of it, and the performance was really amazing that I got. You know, there's some things where I'm like, girl, because 45-year-old Nicole writes different than 20-year-old Nicole, thank God. But
Well, it'd be
it's called growth, I guess.
yeah, it'd be an interesting commentary if things were exactly the same.
Oh, geez. Can you
Yeah.
imagine?
Awful.
Can you imagine if I still was dressing like I was in my 20s?
I mean, can you imagine if anybody did anything the way they did 25 years ago?
Oh my God.
I wonder about those people, you know, the people who used to say to us when we were kids that high school is going to be the best time in your life. You ever get that?
Did people say, well, maybe you were different in high school. I think they were like reassuring me that it had to get better because there was nowhere to go from. But
Well, I don't think this was ever, yeah, I mean, I would have been in the same boat as you, but you know, just like adults, it was just like a thing they would always say because that was the only time they had anything going on. Maybe they still dress the same. I don't know.
oh, well, nobody ever said that to me. Like, don't worry, you're gonna like college a lot more. And you're like, it would be
Yeah, no one said it to me specifically, but you just hear it, you know, like in school. I can remember a history teacher who would say that to all of us, and I would. Even as a 14-year-old, I was like, you are a sad man.
Yeah.
That's a terrible story. You know?
I had the same reaction the few times I heard it. And I was like, ooh, God, I hope not. This is awful. Yeah, I want to move on. And, you know, I tell my students that, you know, bulk of my students are high school, middle school. I'm like, I promise college will be so much more interesting and better. And then it'll just get better after that. So this is the worst. If you can muddle through this, you know, your confidence will get better after, hopefully. High school, no thank you. I tell them that all the time. I'm like, better you than me every time they tell me about their week. I'm sure y'all hear similar things from your college students, right? About how awful all the work they have to do. I don't want that life either. I was glad to put that behind me as well.
Whatever life stage you're in, like the steps or the things in it feel all consuming. And so yes, college students will come in and they'll say, you know, I had this and this and this and this, and they're just like at their wits' end.
Yeah.
In, you know, my vantage point as a much older person, I'm like, yeah, none of those things are really that important. Right. But I remember being them and thinking like, this is going to make or break my existence. And you do it and you live and you discover it wasn't as big a deal as it felt like it was. And then you get jaded and flippant and you're like, none of this is important.
Yeah.
What does any of it mean?
That's why I like to call Elizabeth. Get that upbeat.
None of these things matter. Just laugh.
Just lay on the couch with your food.
Yeah.
No, but to have that perspective, yeah, I mean, because I it's universal. I mean, same as when we were talking about being so serious as youth. You know, I wish I had taken myself less seriously, and I wish I had just allowed myself to have more fun and could have seen into the future and seen that like that algebra class or whatever, like it's fine that I suck at it. I can be a dummy in algebra.
Yeah, right. As long as I kept my scholarship, who cares?
But everything, every tiny little thing in your life means everything, you know?
Oh yeah.
And your world is so small.
Yeah.
When you're young.
Oh my God. I mean, I don't know how many times my flute teacher was professor at UGA was Dr. Wallen. I mean, and I had that like where I came bursting into his office like, I'm gonna change my major, I'm gonna drop it all out, you know, drop out. And I mean, I'm sure he must have rolled his eyes, like, because how many times did he have that conversation a semester? You know, because he was the type of professor where you could have that conversation with, and he'd be empathetic. But yeah, he was another one, you know, when I had that, since he was the constant in my life, you know, geographically, because, you know, I'd call my parents, but I wouldn't tell them everything. But Dr. Juan had to see it firsthand, unfortunately. And, you know, I came in there, I'm like, I'm changing my major in marketing. I can't do it. And he just like looked at me like, that would be a huge mistake. So I didn't quit. I had actually come in there to tell him I was quitting. And I came out like not quitting. And it's like, dang it, Dr. Juan.
That's some good teaching.
Oh yeah. I mean, he wasn't for everybody, to be clear. I mean, a lot of people I didn't have the same feelings I did about him, but there's a lot of people that did, because it's just personality. Everybody has
Nobody's for
professor
everybody.
that didn't, nobody's for everybody. But he was exactly who I needed. And that's why I went there, because at the audition, when I had my first audition with him, I was like, this is the person I need to study with. So that's why I went to UGA, because I was not going to go to UGA. And then there was Dr. Juan. He's like, you should come here. You're amazing. I love you. Yeah.
It's amazing to be able to have that perspective and be able to make the best choice for yourself at that age.
For real. I was not making smart decisions at that age.
I was surrounded by people that were making better decisions for me. I think they listened, you know, and they took what I was reacting to, and were like, that's just a part of it. It's not a means to, you know, set everything on fire. Do y'all have that a lot with your kids coming and bawling at you? I know, Elizabeth, you're still like trying to make them all trust you yet, because you're kind of new there, but
Yeah, I'm new. They're all relatively young.
Yeah.
I think we're in the getting to know you stage, but
yeah.
at my previous institution, it was like whack-a-mole. You get one of them feeling good about their lives, and two more like everything is trash. But and a circle of life.
Yeah.
I guess nobody feels great about what they're doing all the time. I certainly have weeks where I'm like, dang,
Oh, of course.
if I weren't, you know, financially locked into being an adult with, you know, a mortgage or a car payment or whatever, like, I think I'd really like to move to a yurt in the middle of nowhere. But then it passes and you're like, oh, I might actually be okay at this, and things might not be terrible. I don't know. And it just sort of goes in waves depending on the weather and how things are going. And
I think it's pretty
breakfast and how hydrated I am, but
it's pretty natural, right?
It seems to be natural in my existence. I hesitate to speak for others.
Is Nicole Reiner gonna move out into the mountains?
She feels great all the
She's
time.
not very. You're not very far away from them.
Yeah,
so
that's a day
Birdie's
trip.
kind of there.
I can tell you the beer is not as good in those places, so I'm probably not going to move there. No, yeah, I mean, I think again, you know, it's the wisdom to know that those thoughts will pass, which, you know, you don't have when you're 18, you get to college. Yeah. So to answer your original question, I'm seeing more of it the past few years.
Really?
And I think, of course, the pandemic made it weird, but not to sound like a basic bitch, because we keep saying this about the pandemic, but I think it was happening before the pandemic, and then the pandemic accelerated this development maybe. But students coming in as 18-year-olds and just being shocked by the level of work, or you know, I teach at a school where most of the students are coming in. I mean, at the undergraduate level, the vast majority of my students are from Wyoming, and that means they're from a small town.
Yeah.
Because every town, honestly, is a small town in Wyoming. And, you know, so they're number one from freshman year because they actually take the flute home and care. And then they get to college. And this is a wonderfully stimulating experience, right? This is what makes college so great, is that now you're not the best. And I remember being so excited about that and so happy about that as a college student, like, oh, thank God, you know, like, these people are kicking my ass. I can learn so much from them.
Yeah.
But, you know, it hurts people's feelings, and not everybody reacts that way. And so, yeah, I regularly have conversations, but particularly the past maybe 3 or 4 years with the freshmen of like, yeah, this is uncomfortable and weird now because it's different from the way you were living last year, but it's temporary. You know, if you just power through and you know, enjoy the process and get to the other side. I find myself a lot of times just begging them to give it a year. Yeah. Because in October, and I just had this conversation with someone at the end of October, one of my freshmen, you know, it wasn't with flute. Flute's been going great for her, and she's been an absolute delight, and just so hungry for the information that I like more than I expected from her audition, that I thought everything was going great. And then I heard from her theory teacher that she hadn't shown up for a month.
Oh no.
And so she had emailed the student and said, I suggest you just withdraw and start again next year so that you can be successful in this.
Yeah.
And so when she got to her lesson, I was like, what's going on with theory? You know, and she was like, yeah, it's not for me. It's just boring and I don't like it. And I was like, is it boring or is it hard? You know?
Well, then
And so
what
she
major
was
doesn't
like-
have stuff that's boring?
Yeah.
That is a hill I will die on with
That
many
is
of my students. They're like,
absolutely.
oh, I only want to play. I don't want to
Agree.
worry about all of this like academic stuff. And I'm like, okay, you find me a degree that doesn't have a class that
Yeah.
you don't like. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I'll wait.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
And so she's, you know, we had that talk. We had the talk about like, it's okay to admit something's hard, just ask for help, you know. And she was looking at me the whole time, just like I was literally like pooping out of my mouth, you know. I mean, just like the look on her face the whole time. I was like, this is not going well. I'm gonna lose this student. But then 2 weeks later, you know, she emailed and she was like, I've decided to keep my major.
Oh,
You
God.
know? But yeah, I think I don't want to say like in the good old days, you know, when we didn't care about our mental health and just white knuckled through our lives, which I think was very, very much the valiant thing to do in my generation. I don't want to lionize that. I think it's great that people are more in tune with mental health as an ever-changing thing that needs care. But everything is hard in the beginning. Like everything is hard if you're going to learn new things. And
Yeah.
I'm finding that more of my students that's really a punch in the face when they get to school. Like, oh, I'm not done learning and I have to do weird stuff that feels very uncomfortable on the flute, or I thought I was a great musician, but now there's this oral skills component and I can't do it. And I'm always adding like, yet you can't do it.
yes, that's such a good word.
Yeah.
But it's a slog trying to win people over to that sometimes. And I think, you know, what's great at my age is that I have those thoughts sometimes about things. Thoughts about things, that was stupid, but I can add the yet, you know, so I can like wallow, you know, and like mope around the house drinking box wine for a night and then you know, just like, yeah, but you know, you're going to choose this again, like
right,
times. Just figure out a creative solution to the problem.
Right.
Resilience is tricky. And I think whether they stick with the music thing or, you know, end up changing their degree to math or biology or what the heck ever, resilience is the thing. And I know in my own life, and I think maybe in one of your lives as well, you know, there have been times when I have quit. Because sometimes you need to know that you can, and you did. And I did it, and it was the wrong choice. So I undid it later.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes, you know, and I've been in, when I was in that graphic design job for doing that for like 10 years, sometimes I'd have a really bad day and just making a resume would make me feel better. You know, I mean, because there were times I was like, I knew the job I was at, like, if I'm going to leave this job, I'm going to leave it for the music profession. I don't want to go to another graphic designer position, because that would be admitting that this has become a career. And I remember there were times, especially after our company got bought out and I felt I had like 3 bosses and I'd just gotten the one art director. Like, I finally figured out how his brain works. And then I got another art director. It was like, no, cannot. And y'all are not agreeing. And one of you have not talked to the client like me and the other one had, you know, and it was just like, ooh. And I just remember going home and just like writing up my resume. And all of a sudden, my next day, I was like, well, I have my resume updated. I feel a little bit better. I can hit send to whatever if I really want to escape, you know. And it didn't get better. It got worse over the year. And Brian and I were getting close to getting married. And really the only thing I was hanging on for was the health insurance for the company. And, you know, we were in a parking lot and Brian's just like, quit. quit. And then I was taking lessons with Christina Smith, and she's like, quit. It'd be great. Just quit. And I'm like, girl, you have a job. You don't know. So I kind of disregard. It was nice that she told me she had faith in me that I'd make it work somehow. But also at the same time, I was like, girl, you got a cush job. I mean, it's not cush, like it's hard, but I mean, like you have stability. And what I would be walking into is like,
not that.
But I had another friend that did exactly the same thing I did. So I did a little freelance graphic design while the music stuff started getting a little more stable-ish. But yeah, it was nice to have those friends tell me to quit. But it's really hard to get that faith. But writing a resume is very helpful. Also cruising for other majors is very helpful, and then seeing what their coursework would be, and then just bailing on it because you're like, no, thank you. How many semesters of statistics do I have to take?
Ooh.
You think theory is bad? Yeah, no, thank you. So that helped too. You know, I talked to Dr. Wong, and I think I remember looking up. I told him I wasn't going to quit, or at least I'd think about it. And then I think I remember looking up coursework for advertising major or whatever, and I just was not into it.
That's a great advising strategy. And I think the next time someone threatens to change their major, I'm going to say, cool, let's make a 4-year plan for your new major.
Go see what that coursework is like, and see if those classes seem read the descriptions.
Oh, yeah,
if those are any better.
Of our organic chemistry. Yeah, that looks super fun.
I don't know if it would work with an 18-year-old. I might not have to try, but
true.
But for myself, you know, there were times when I was in grad school and I'd have a bed lesson. I was living with my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, and he would come home. My lesson days would sometimes switch. They wouldn't always be the same day every week. He would come home and I'd be sitting at the computer looking up bartending jobs of all things. And he would say, oh, did you have your lesson today? You know, and the first time he did that, I was like, oh, I didn't even notice the pattern, you know. But what I would do is I'd come home and I would think, oh, he hates me. He thinks I'm a moron. This is it. You know, I've wanted the crystal ball to look into and see if I'm going to make it. And he doesn't think I'm going to make it. And that's why he's being so mean to me, you know. So I need to, and I've done nothing but flute, so I don't want to do any more college, you know. And so I would look at these bartending jobs, and then I would think about how sad that thought made me, you know, to not be playing my flute and to be a bartender. And that would kind of set me back on the path for a while. I don't know if it would work with someone too young to have spent a lot of time on their instruments yet, but for me, every time I would think about it, wasn't, I mean, there were other interests that I had before college too, that I sort of had to slowly clean out of the closet when I really noticed that I just kept going to the practice room. Noticed that I kept wanting to do my theory homework, you know. But thinking about not having music in my life always eventually made me realize, like, all right, this is very tedious sometimes. This is very hard and very scary. I don't know if I'm going to succeed, but I like this more than anything else.
I had to do it. I had to do I picked something else that was tedious that I had to do for a little while, and I didn't have music in my life. And then all of a sudden all of my hobbies and my after work time was suddenly being occupied with music activities. And I'm like, why do I hate my 9 to 5? And then I take all of this quote unquote free time to fill with the things that I could be doing from 9 to 5. So I think it's different for everybody. I like to learn School of Hard Knocks. So I did officially quit and put the flute on a shelf for a while.
I did get some solid advice when I was 17. It was had gone with some high school friends from Savannah, and we'd driven to Atlanta, and we're going to stay at one of our friends' brother's house who lived in Atlanta overnight. But the one of the day, it was a art college portfolio review, and you could stand in line at all these colleges had their recruiters, and you could have them look at your portfolio, and they could give you feedback so that you could go to art school. And so I remember I'd gotten in the wrong line.
Oh no.
And all my friends knew except for me. And they did not tell me because there were no cell phones back in the day. So they saw me stand, like I was across the room. I was standing in the line for Ringling Art School to look at my portfolio. And my other friends knew he looked brutal. Like, I guess they overheard him when they were in another line or whatever. Like, he was being really cutthroat brutal.
Nice.
And I didn't really notice it, and nor did I care, because I was 17. Bright-eyed, bushy-tail. I'm gonna work for Disney. And then, yeah. And because I had animation in high school, I had some animation frames. And so he opened it up and he looked at it, and we were talking, and I was telling him I was also thinking about music school, and he's like, oh, and I was going to double major. And he's like, well, Ringling doesn't have it, so you'd have to make a decision. And I'm like, well, yeah. And he said, first of all, I don't think your portfolio is good enough to do that. But like I think he was sharing me a new one, and rightly so. My portfolio was subpar. I enjoyed drawing. I enjoyed animating, but Ringling was not going to be the school for me. That was another level that I was not ready for. And I didn't even know who Ringling was at the time. And that should tell you plenty. And he said, double majoring is really hard. One major enough is hard. You pick two majors that are very time consuming. What I suggest you do is lock yourself in a room for one day, do one thing, and then the next day do the other thing. And the one that you check the clock for more is the one you need to drop.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
And then I had a meltdown and went sobbing back to my friends, and we all left. Because I was 17, but I did hear him. And I think his delivery was rotten. Maybe it wasn't rotten, but to a 17-year-old, it was pretty rotten.
Is there any nice way to poke a hole in a 17-year-old's dream?
No, there isn't.
We were all 17 and we're like, I love 12 things and I'm going to somehow fit all 12 of them into the 24 hours a day I get.
And I'm so good at all 12 of them.
Right. And I think my frame of mind was I was going there to go to art school, for them to snatch me up and give me a scholarship. And what that place was really for was to tidy up your portfolio. So when you did come to the portfolio reviews or when you submitted your work, they were what they were looking for. That's what that was for. But my little brain was somewhere else. And he was giving me criticism.
I don't know. I think that experience sounds familiar. The details for myself would be very different. But as you were talking, I was like, I can think of at least 2 high school aged anecdotes that lines up with. And I turned out okay, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So
I mean, I still did my double major. I still did what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But eventually I did realize that focusing on one. I mean, luckily my digital media major came in handy to promote myself musically. So all was not for naught, but it was a hard 5 years in school trying to do 2 degrees at once.
That's so interesting because I think the message when a lot of us were coming up was you can only do one thing if you want to do any of it well. And now it's, explore all the facets of yourself because you don't know which facet is going to end up shaping who you are as a brand or a package or like the thing that you end up becoming. And it's, you got the do the one thing message, but you use both. I had many interests, which I think rear their heads in a variety of different ways in my professional persona. Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I think luckily, when I went through that, I was luckily 18, 18 through 20 when you don't really need a lot of sleep and you think you can do anything. So yeah. And then you find out you can't. And then that's really hard. Like Nicole Reiner was saying earlier. And then you feel awful. And then you just need one person to believe in you. Like I had Dr. Juan or my dad. And then all of a sudden it's fine. So
I think more things are possible. I don't know, maybe that's a benefit of youth is you think everything is possible. And so maybe it is more possible than it would be.
Maybe, but I'm sure as professors, it's hard to watch.
It is.
Yeah.
Having been someone who was doing a lot of things that I quote unquote had no business doing, I don't know if my life turned out the way that I thought it was gonna, but it turned out different than my faculty thought it would too.
Yeah.
And so I often, when kids tell me they want to do XYZ and I'm like, I don't know how that's gonna work, but it seems to me if it is, these 3 things need to happen. Let me know how I can help. And then you step back and you're like, I look forward to being wrong, I guess.
Mhm.
Magic.
I did get some professor admit he was wrong about me, and it was really amazing. I didn't get into composition department my first year, for like your barrier interview. We had like an interview process. And I got put on probation. Like if I could pull up my grades, like if I could take contemporary theory and all of that and make A's, then they would let me in the following year, which was fine because I already knew I was going to take 5 years. So it's fine with that, not necessarily fine with having to wait or take private lessons like that. But I had my senior recital. It went okay. It went pretty good. I mean, there was some, it's a senior recital. Of course, there's train wrecks, but it was, for the most part, I got good performers, so that wasn't to blame. My parents came and all of that. And then while I was like helping remove the percussion department back down to the percussion room, because I felt the need to use every percussion instrument, one of the composition professors, I won't out him, I suppose, even though he's not with us anymore, came up to my parents and said, which I always thought he was delightful. He was scary when he taught theory, but he was delightful when I took like electronic music with him and everything. He told my parents, it's like, I owe you guys an apology. I was the tipping vote for Nicole not getting into the composition department. And he said, I was really wrong about that.
Aw.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a scary theory professor, but he turned out to be, he was my advisor. I had no idea he was the vote. And he was like my composition advisor for my independent study portion of my digital media, because he was an electronic music person, and he volunteered. He's like, yeah, I'll be your advisor. So he had to read my dissertation. He took me on to do electronics because I didn't have enough time to do a full class. So he taught it privately for me so I could fit it in. He did all those things. But yeah, he was the standout because he saw me as a train wreck in sophomore theory, and it was all founded. But
very specific window of someone's existence. I shudder to think what probably my like freshman oral skills teacher thought of the rest of my life. Anybody who teaches knows like this is a snapshot of what is going on with the larger human being. And if they don't know that, then they need to re-examine.
Yeah. No, but he didn't have to say anything. He outed himself. He didn't have to say he was the vote that kept me back.
That's lovely though. I think that's lovely. Mm-hmm. I think the closest I got to and I was wrong about was on one of my jury sheets. I will out him because he signed his name to it. But the oboe professor at my undergrad wrote on the last jury of mine that he oversaw. It turns out that Elizabeth has some substance after all.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Music Crush. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast, read show notes, and learn more about FNMC by visiting www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com.